Well, what are we going to do? You know, New England's over there and we're here. It seems like it's a long ways away. Anyway, that's what I was feeling. I was really slow to get enthusiastic about doing the 250th celebration because I feel like my personal mission is to do a good job in our local history first. So, in order to kind of succeed on all the fronts, I tried to figure out, well, how are we going to do that? Involve local history as well as national history, and hopefully do a good job at it. And what I've come up with in the museum too, supporting everything and doing exhibits, separate from what I'm involved with, we've come up with this tour, which focuses on the ancestors of several key families here, the oldest families. And so our job today will be to see if we can reach back in time, reach across the country, all the way to the East Coast, and have that somehow feel relevant to what we're all about here, to our character, to our history, all of that. And I think we might succeed. So hang in there, okay? It's going to be a lot of information, and some of the information they're going to give you, like names and dates and things, don't feel like you have to remember them all, because we have a hard enough time just remembering the names of the folks here, much less their big families back east. I mean, we're talking like 10 kids a lot of times, and stuff like that. So a lot of just kind of sometimes minutiae things, but it'll put a face on it all. When we start mentioning names, sometimes you'll see a correspondence of those names from back east to here. They'll have the same name, that kind of thing. Okay. Yeah, again, welcome. I'd like to find out a little bit about you, if I can, just roll up front. Anybody have family that's buried at Sunnyside? Anybody? Okay. Yeah, that's right. Okay. And of course you would, Nancy.
My husband's entire family is here.
Okay. Yeah.
From the 1850s.
1850s.
1853, I think. Is
Yeah.
when my,
I want to talk to you more about that later.
Came.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing I wanted to find out, because I don't want to pretend to be, and Dan doesn't want to pretend to be the expert on this stuff. There's nothing like the families who grew up here and have been here for a long time. Just want to be upfront about that. Nevertheless, I'm going to try to do a good job and get into it. And I'm subject to correction.
Oh, no, I'm sure you know more than I do.
And you can beat on me later if I didn't mention your family enough.
They're used to it.
Okay.
I mean, things around here are named after them, so you can't get
So
away
what
from
is
it.
their last name?
The Libby family, the Hancock family.
Ooh, Hancock. Okay.
Yeah. The Priest family.
We're in trouble now. We got a Hancock with us.
She's a fact checker.
Really, I don't know much. My
Oh, good.
mother-in-law
Oh, good.
passed
Okay.
away a couple of years ago, last year. Was very involved in her family history and the whole history of Central Whidbey. So she
Yeah.
was like a treasure trove
Yeah.
of information.
That's right. Thank you. And the other reason to just ask you kind of how you relate to the cemetery is because this is a heritage tour, and we just want to acknowledge that not everybody sees these kinds of tours in the same way, that there's just much more to the cemetery than just doing heritage, obviously. And so we have a couple people here with those kinds of sensitivities. And one of the things I try to do is keep an eye out for folks who are kind of making their way through the cemetery, who are actually visiting their family, and be sensitive about that. But I don't think we'll have too much of a problem with that today. All right. Anything that you'd like to ask? I'll just mention that restrooms are way down there by the maintenance shed, if anybody needs to take advantage of that. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah. Any comments from anybody? Okay. All right, let's head out. We're gonna go to a certain spot over here that's actually not a grave site spot. It's more about the cemetery, and gather there. And then from that point, we're going to go to 4 different families. Okay, charge. Hey, copy. Oops.
Can I join you?
Yes, you may. Is that Lynn? Is that Lynn?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's head this way right through. Well, no, follow down. Follow down. Here we go.
Not William Robertson.
Yeah,
He
there's
had a flag.
Robertson's.
He wasn't in a war.
I know. Dan and I walked through yesterday, and we found a number of them that are off.
Yeah,
It's
he
even on
wasn't
the
in it.
wife's.
He did
It's
not-
even on the wife's side.
Oh, but yeah, that's silly.
All right. Oh, that's mine. That's my hanky.
Oh.
Oh my gosh. I got to have my hanky today. Woo.
Great. None of them were.
Oh, my.
Go ahead and tell 'em about this intersection.
Okay. Yeah. So let me just preface that when we make our way around the plots and the monuments, we'll just want to be careful and respectful at the same time. So what Dan and I would like to request is that occasionally we'll actually go in a plot, he and I, or he or I, and then if you would remain outside the plots, and I think that works best for a lot of reasons. Welcome Lynn Hyde and Kathy Baxter. We kind of had introductions and some talk up there. We're very honored to have both of you here today. No, they're super involved with our history here, as many of you know. And Lynn has the distinction of bringing a chunk of New England to us today, because she has worked in history in Boston and maybe some other places, I don't know. But sometimes it's really helpful to get that perspective when we talk about these old families and where they came from, because the geography is really important. The state maps, the county maps, the movement of families across a state like Virginia we'll be talking about quite a bit. One of the messages, what we're doing today, there's 2 of them I want to tell you about. One of the main messages is that these families back east were always on the frontier, and they were essentially always moving west. Even before the Revolutionary War, during the Revolutionary War, and after the war, if you trace their history, you can see them moving steadily west. And I'll show you a map later on inside that was made in 1884. There's the first map made in the United States that was copyrighted, and it was by an American. The French had already made a similar one, but this one's by an American. And it shows for the New England states a whole bunch of Illinois and Michigan and all that stuff. They were, in that map, they were already headed west. That's the mentality of the Americans. And that's something that Lynn can speak to, because it's very important that we appreciate that the Americans were always pretty much oriented that way, but the British were not. So part of the war really was over territory really early on, not just New England per se, but we're talking about way out there to the west. So that's a kind of a main message that I came away with studying this stuff. And the other main message is that we have significant connections, families here to their ancestors there and the war. That's the other thing. They're significant. You'll find out. Okay, now Dan's going to talk a little bit about the cemetery itself.
Yeah, it's, right where we're standing here is actually the intersection of kind of an important intersection of this. If you look down here, you'll see a post, and a straight line down that way, you see a post. This section here, bordered by the road down there, is the original EB graveyard. So this was the very first part of this cemetery right here in 1865. This got started, and then this Sunnyside from here over to the hedge over there is the Sunnyside edition. That was what, 10 years later, maybe? Not long after that.
Yeah, not long. Dr. Kellogg.
Yeah, Dr. Kellogg bought that, and that ended up being the Sunnyside edition. And once this was established as the cemetery in Central Woodby, it started filling up pretty fast. So they kept going with additions, and then this is the
Valley View.
Valley View is from here over that way, and this was several additions over time, and it extended that way. But once again, this was the very start of this cemetery in 1865. So
Okay.
what we're going to do, since we're starting here, actually call it the EB graveyard, and for that reason it was the EB family was the first one buried up here. So we're going to walk around the front of this plot. This is one of the EB plots, and we'll start here.
Okay, if you'll gather kind of right here facing us, all through here.
So I'm sure that if you're from Whidbey Island, everybody knows the EBs. They're some of the first pioneers here. And so everyone knows all about the EBs, but we're going to start with them. And they're an interesting family. There's a lot written about them, so they're kind of fun to read about. But we're going to start with the EBs that were here on Whidbey Island. And then after that, we'll go to the Revolutionary War veterans that were involved in the war. So starting here, we all know Isaac Eby was the first white settler to come here in 1850. And if you're ever down on that beach down there and you look up and you see that ravine that goes up the hill and you see the ferry house sitting at the top, well, that's Isaac Eby walked up that ravine, probably on an old, probably a Native American trail, went up that. It's about the only way to get up to that prairie from the beach. So he walked up there to the top of that ravine and stood out and looked out and saw the water and the mountains and decided this is where he wanted to build his cabin and bring his family, and his future was going to be right down here. So he comes in 1850. A year later, his wife Rebecca and his two sons, Ellison and Eason, they come out on the Oregon Trail to join him. And in that time, I'm hoping he had his cabin built for them when they got here, but there was nothing here besides the Native Americans. There was no structures. So they come out to live with him at the cabins in 1851. Following that, a couple years later, the rest of his family comes out. His mother and father, Jacob and Sarah Eby, they come out. And if you know the Jacob and Sarah Eby house out here, it's a wonderful house to check out if you have time. They come out along with Isaac's brother, Winfield, and he has two sisters that come out on the Oregon Trail, Elizabeth Ruth and Mary Bozarth. So basically it's about 3 generations of Ebys all come west on the Oregon Trail to join him out here. So he must have been a pretty good influence to get them to, what a journey to come out here and join him. So unfortunately the Ebys have what I think is kind of a rough start. I mean, all pioneers, it was a hard life. It was hard to, it was rare to live a real long life back in that time, but I think the Ebys had a little more than their fair share of tragedy in their family. So we'll just buzz through that really quick. Rebecca, she comes out. She actually has consumption. She's been ill for a while, but she gives birth to a daughter, and they name her Hetty. And not long after that birth, Rebecca dies. And she dies right down here at the cabins, and that's where they bury her. They bury her right up along that ravine there, right next to their home. I mean, that was typical at that time. You bury your family in your home, next to your home. So she passes away. And then 1857, we all know Isaac was killed. So he's buried right next to her, down there on the ravine. A few years after that, we have, let's see, 1859, Isaac's mother dies. Sarah, she's living up here in the Jacob Eby house. She passes away. She's buried down there, and now that's becoming the Eby graveyard. That's where everyone's going. Hetty, their daughter, 7-year-old daughter, dies of consumption. So sad. But she's buried down there. A couple years later, Jacob dies. And in the same year Jacob dies, Isaac's sister, Elizabeth Ruth, she's out here at the head of Penn Cove picking berries along Blower's Bluff. And she falls and has a fall down the bluff. Some Native Americans find her down on the beach. They help carry her up. But she ends up dying a couple months later from her injuries. And so now 6 of the Ebys are buried down here within a short amount of time. Just a rough time for the Ebys. So what we have left. We have Winfield and Mary Bozarth, brother and sister. Well, Winfield is very ill now too. He has some stuff. He's been fighting this for a while, but the last minute he decides to go to California, hoping to find a cure, or maybe the climate or whatever reason. He's hoping it's a last ditch effort for him to try to get his health back. He goes to California. The next thing you know, Mary gets a letter in the mail, post office mail, that states she needs to go claim Winfield's body. He's over here in Port Townsend. They shipped him up in a zinc-lined coffin, and he had passed away down in California while I was there. So Mary is pretty distraught, as you can imagine. Her whole family, she's coming over here with this, planning this big future in this beautiful area, and now her entire family has all passed away in a short amount of time. And so at that time she decides she's not going to bury him down there in the Eby graveyard. She's making a change, and she lives over, she has inherited the Jacob Eby house at this time. She walks over here and she stands right in the spot that we're standing, and she decides to bury Winfield right here. Her brother's going to be up on the hill with her. So that's right here is his headstone, and we're standing in the exact place that she stood when she chose the spot. And when at the funeral, I'm sure there was all the townspeople were up here. The Crockett's and the Alexanders and the Coops all came, and then we're standing right where we're standing today. Although this was probably pretty much all a grassy hill, no trees at that time. And it was just what Mary decided she wanted to do. And the idea was that she was going to move her rest of her family up here at a later time. And so that's how this whole thing got started, in this little corner of the hill here.
And then back east?
Yes. And then
there's another big piece to this.
he was really stressing the back east thing, and I love the back east thing, but I love the Eby story. I love thinking about it. So I wanted to start with that. So now
have to reroute them.
Now we'll go to the ancestors of the Ebys, and we go back to Jacob's father, or Isaac's grandfather, was a man by the name of George Eby. He was born in 1764, and he, at the age of 17, it was 1781, age of 17, he enlists in the Revolutionary War in the John Stone Company, 2nd Battalion, Pennsylvania Militia. So he joins up, and there's no real notable, remarkable stories about his time in the Revolutionary War that I could find, but just that he was in it. And so he was buried in Winchester, Illinois. And Lee and I found the picture of his headstone. I'll have this over in there. We can look at it later if you're interested. But this is George Eby's headstone. There's an actual Eby graveyard, family plot over there that he's buried in. And at the bottom of the headstone, you'll see a bronze plaque. It's the Daughters of the Revolution bronze plaque, a beautiful plaque. It says George Eby II, Revolutionary Soldier. So that was kind of cool to find that. And apparently he's one of the rare soldiers that's buried in Illinois. I guess that was kind of rare for him to be buried that far west. So we have that. And the other thing about him is he is the first one to add the second E in EB. Before George Eby, before him, they mostly spelled it EBY without that second E. But this George Eby consistently spelled it EBEY. So that was kind of interesting, and it made the, searching these names interesting too, because you know how, I don't know how, but you go back and the spellings change over time.
And that way we can help keep them straight too.
Yeah,
it helps.
Yeah, and this George Eby, I swear there's a lot of George Ebys. This one on this plaque says George Eby II. I had him as George Eby IV. But for today, we'll just say he's George Eby II. Yeah. So then we go back to his father, and his name is George Eby, and they don't no middle names, by the way. Nothing better. Date of birth's about all you can go by. But his father had some remarkable history and documented history in the Revolutionary War. He was born in 1738, and he enlisted in the Continental Army at the age of 38 in 1776. So he already had a big family at that time, but he decided to enlist Continental Army, and he probably the first remarkable thing I read was that he was at Valley Forge under George Washington in that winter, and he was a gunsmith by trade before joining up. And while he was at Valley Forge, he took old gun barrels, discarded gun barrels, and he somehow made this coffee mill, and it's just a little like a coffee grinder. And he made this, hammered it out, however he manufactured, but somehow he made this in Valley Forge, and it makes me think that he was probably a pretty popular person at that time. I mean, I think of sitting there in the cold and the miserable winter, and suddenly some guy can grind some coffee and make. It sounds like one of the few pleasures you probably had back at that time. So this coffee mill is still in the Eby family, and they protected it. It's a really important heirloom to them. They talk about how they threw it in the river when there was a threat of a Native American raid or something. They would toss it in the river and then retrieve it later so it wouldn't get taken or something. So that's pretty important. That's something you really treasure. So so that was the first thing I read about George Eby I. And then the second big thing he was involved with was the Battle of Stony Point. And I don't know if you've heard about the Battle of Stony Point. There's a lot to read about it if you're interested. But in trying to summarize it, Stony Point was this big rocky fort above the Hudson River that the British were occupying, and they had about 500 or 600 British troops occupying this big rocky, very easily defensible fort. They didn't think there was any threat of anyone ever taking that fort away from them. But George Washington wanted to take that back, so he handpicked Brigadier General Mad Wayne Anthony, who mad sounds like crazy mad, but I think he was just a brave. He was a good man as far as I can tell, and he led about 1,300 troops, and they came up with a plan to take Stony Point. And they marched many miles, sometimes single file through forests and back trails to get to Stony Point, and they stop about 1.5 miles before they get there. They're trying to go unnoticed by the British, and their plan is to do a night attack, take it at night under cover of the darkness. So they get about 1.5 miles. They start up to the farmer's field. They lay out their plan to the soldiers. They're given a rum ration. I don't.
A courage ration.
I guess it's just like that's what it said. I read it several times. They're given rum ration. They're also given a little piece of white paper. So they pin this white paper to their hats, the front of their hat, and that was just to identify each other, in the dark, in the night. Pretty simple, but probably worked.
Yeah.
And then part of their plan was they were dividing up into a couple divisions to ascend this hill to take this fort, and they needed volunteers. And they needed 40 volunteers. They're going to have 2 groups of 20, and these groups are called the Forlorn Hope, which pretty much tells you what these guys' job was going to be. It was kind of hopeless. They were in the most danger in this battle. But the important thing is George Eby volunteered. He was one of the volunteers to be part of this forlorn hope. And what they would do is they would lead the soldiers up this hill, and they had to remove the abatis. I think it's called abatis. Abattis.
Oh,
I have a story about trying to learn how to pronounce that. But so the abattis was the British had cut all the trees down on this hill to make it all open, and they used the trees to basically make fences and fortress and sharpen the branches and make this obstacle that no one could get through. Well, the Forlorn Hope with George Eby, their job was to take axes and picks and go up first and cut a pathway for the soldiers. And they were going to be just right out in the open at a target once they get discovered. So very dangerous. But again, I think when you think of bravery and courage, I think that's kind of the definition. Raising your hand, say, yeah, I'll do that. Like, you know. So George is part of that. The battle went well. They went with fixed bayonets, no musket, their muskets were not loaded because they didn't want to give away their position by firing an accidental shot or anything. They went fixed bayonets up the hill. It went all as planned. They took the British in about 25 minutes. The British had already surrendered, and there was very few people killed.
how about the cry that they let out?
Yeah, they were told that the first soldiers to get into the fort were supposed to yell out, "The fort is our own." There was the instructions.
This is in the dark.
Yeah, in the dark. And so right when they got up there, they started yelling out, "The fort is our own." And I assume that was the British would hear that, you know, from being caught off guard and maybe had been asleep, whatever. And the fort is our own, and they thought they were defeated before it even started. Which, you know, it's just that you know, little things like that can make a big difference. So they had all given up, and but there was soldiers killed. It was a battle, a lot of shots fired, a lot of injured, and the British ended up having about 80 injured and 20 killed out of 600. And the Americans had 15 killed and about 80 injured. But unfortunately, out of those 15 soldiers that were killed, George Eby was one of them. And most of those deaths were in that group, the Forlorn Hope group, as far as I can tell. So it was a very successful battle. It really gave hope to all the soldiers that, you know, in this war. I think it was kind of a turning point for a lot of soldiers. But George Eby was part of that, and I'm sure that story was told to his, you know, to George II and down to Jacob and Isaac, and that story was a story told in their family when they talked about this and everything else. And it probably was inspiration for them, maybe inspiration when they decided to come west on the Oregon Trail. I mean, that kind of stories in your family, I think, can have that effect. Yeah. And maybe that did on their family. But so that's it for the Ebys, and they're tied to the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, no kidding. That's our guy back there.
Yeah.
And you want to come back next week for the Hancocks?
Sorry. I tried to say I was going to keep it
No,
short,
it was
but
all great. I'd heard some of it, but wow.
yeah.
I'll try to equal that. Here we go. Can you stick in here for a little longer? Sure. Okay. We're going to just go a short ways here to the Hancock plot.
You're halfway through. Yep. Did you hear? Halfway.
Halfway?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
It's hopeless. Oh, man.
Are you doing this one, Lee?
We will, yeah, and it's going to start out with this one. Uh-huh.
You know what? They didn't care for this for a lot of years. And just to get an idea of that, I saw a picture of this. This is Sam Hancock's. They show a picture looking straight at the front gate of that, and there's no tree in the picture that I saw. And so that tree is, they're volunteers. I think it was overgrown for a lot of years and unkept, and that's when these trees got started. Yeah, so these trees were not originally here, even though they look really old. No documented.
Okay.
We can look later down at
Some of
the.
these ground penetrating radar over there.
Yeah. Well.
Why don't
Okay,
we do that?
next week we're going to have a continuation of the EBs.
Sorry.
Alrighty, here we are at the Hancock plot, right here. You can tell by the size of the monument that there might be something going on here with the people. You can also tell by the size of the tree that this cemetery might have gone through some periods of benign neglect. I don't think they built the plot around the tree. It's right in the entrance. It's unbelievable. That's a big tree. Okay, well, the Hancocks, unlike the Ebys, are a family here that is very important. They've been here for a long time, but are not as well known. But we're going to try to change that. I'll tell you a story about how I first became best acquainted with the Hancocks. It was through the second of his narratives that Samuel Hancock wrote. He wrote two. One was the Oregon Trail, going on that. The second one was his trading post out at Nia Bay. And that's the one that I found absolutely hair-raising. Okay, here's what happened. So after exploring Puget Sound, trying to find coal, he finally decided, he maybe didn't find quite enough or something, but anyway, he decided to set up a trading post out at Nia Bay, of all things, by himself. I mean, yeah, what was the thought process involved with that? Anyway, the trading posts met with some skepticism by the natives at first, but it caught on and he was reasonably successful. And then on a voyage up to Vancouver Island, he unfortunately lost his ship. It hit rocks, there was bad weather, all that. And so there followed a couple of days and nights of trying to get away from the natives there who wanted to capture him. And they finally did. And the way he survived, the way he tells the story is, I had to tell him stories. He could speak the language, you know, he had been at Nia Bay for some time. And so he told stories to entertain them, and he incorporated in those stories as many native words, and actually they were songs. Oh, they loved songs. Yeah, they were story songs. And the incorporated native language in that as much as he could. And it worked. They didn't make a slave out of him right away. They didn't kill him, whatever. But he escaped. He escaped. And so this was a day and night kind of thing where he was being pursued and everything. Finally, he sees that Eli Hathaway from Penn Cove has the schooner or bark, I don't know which it was, but anyways, a big ship that was anchored out there called the Damaris Cove, built in Maine. We returned to Maine a little bit later. And he makes his way to the ship, and Eli Hathaway is happy to rescue him and everything. And Samuel was just ever grateful, of course, but he did decide to leave Nia Bay. Okay, so the way he did that was he took his trade goods from his trading post and put them on a platform that he built over 3 small boats. One was a ship's launch and 2 were dugout Indian canoes. And they're all lashed together, and he jerry-rigged a sail on it and sailed and probably mostly drifted from Nia Bay to Port Townsend, where he sold his goods. And then from there, okay, he doesn't have anything except himself. He goes to Whidbey Island to his family that he had talked into coming here, and he married. And this is right at the end of his narrative. So I made my way to Whidbey Island. I married. I lived the quiet life of a farmer. The end. Now I say the Indian this way because he's that matter of fact throughout the whole thing. It's like this guy, he's got to be cut from a different cloth than most of us. And so that story really illustrates it. And it got me to thinking, well, what kind of family and what kind of background did he come from, from back east? And it turns out, yeah, he did come from some background. He had the Revolutionary War soldiers from the family back there were 4 sons. The father is kind of fuzzy as to who he was. The only thing we know about him is what a grandson later wrote, which said that on his property, he kept Tories and deserters for some time, holding them on his property. He was not in the army, but he was, kind of part of the effort.
Like a jail?
Uh-huh.
Like a jail?
In effect, yeah. Who knows what it looked like? It could have been a
Yeah,
corn
right.
crib, or I don't know what, but yeah, that's right. So that's all we know about the father, and that's from the grandson. But the 4 sons all fought. Well, 4 of them fought. There may have been more sons. I can't remember. The families were big. And Samuel was the name of one of the sons. So here we have a correspondence, a name correspondence. And then there was Edward, and there was Simon, and there was Matthew, I think, something like that. And so we'll start with, let's see, what is the 4th one? William. Okay, 4th one's William. I'm going to have notes for this, as you can see. All righty. So Samuel entered at the ripe age or the tender age of 16. So I think he bested your guy by 1 year. Okay, and he did 4 tours all through the war. Now the Revolutionary War basically started in 1775 and ended in 1884, I think it was. Is that right? So it's almost a decade. He was there the whole time in various capacities. He was enlisted twice and drafted twice. And anyway, there's a lot of story around that, but he wasn't in the Continental Army, and that's when it really gets interesting, like what Dan brought up. When you find one of them in the Continental Army for very long, there was some significant things going on. It was militia service, and one of the fascinating things for me in researching all this was to see the distinction between serving in the militia versus the Continental Army. There's a big difference. And these militia guys, which the Hancocks mostly were, they did a variety of things, and a lot of times they're kind of like policemen, keeping the Tories and occasionally the deserters too. Okay, Edward was in the militia, and he was drafted specifically for the purpose of taking Tories and taking and holding of Tories. No mention of deserters for him. And then Simon, I think he was in the militia, but he died in Pennsylvania, so he might have been in the Continental Army. Not much information on him, except from the grandson. And he died in Pennsylvania, about 28 miles from Valley Forge in 1776. The grandson testified in a deposition, essentially, that he knew that his grandfather was involved with taking, and here he mentioned deserters. So deserters, not much difference between the two. Yeah, so he did both, and further he said that I recollect, this is evidence now, mind you, so that the family can get pensions. That started in around 1834 when 1832 is when the funding was put into place. They didn't have funding for pensions and stuff before that. So it became very important to gather the records, because the records, they were haphazard and practically never existed, or they got burned. They're too big burns for records. So they got evidence from the families. And the evidence that the grandson came up with was, well, my granddad, he had a cannon at our place, and he said that cannon was captured. He captured it during the war, and unfortunately I don't have it because we were celebrating the 4th of July and we double charged the barrel and it blew up. Oh heck. And then William Hancock was drafted for the purpose of taking Tories. So they were kind of like the policemen of the area.
So historically, did anybody support these people in providing food for their prisoners?
Yeah, what
Or
was
they
left
on
over
their
in the
own?
corn crib.
Yeah. I mean, there was no.
It was really hard, by watching Ken Burns, you get a feeling for this kind of thing. And foragers were a major item in the armies, both on the British and the American side. And so I forget which one it was, but one of our guys was involved with capturing 28 foragers that were English, and then having to watch them and take care of them. No detail about the quality of the care. I'm sorry. Yeah. No, it was a cruel war, and it was a long war. I mean, how many wars go almost a decade? And the rate of participation of people in the army at that time was the highest that this country's ever known, of course, proportionate to the population. Yeah, when you think about it, the number of people that served on either side, and actively, militia or continental, it's a lot. Yeah. All righty. There's only two markers in here next to the commemorative stone, and one is for Samuel, and the other one leads to over here. That's Susan Hunter Crockett Hancock. Okay, so Samuel married one of Walter Sr.'s daughters, and here they are right next door to each other. Dan discovered, I didn't really notice this, but these are identical mirror images of each other on the plot, the two. There might be a connection between them other than the marriage connection. It turns out that in my research I found that they started out more or less in central and eastern Virginia and slowly moved their way across the state to the west until finally they ended up in the same area of western Virginia, these two families. So you can speculate that they maybe knew each other before the marriage. They were rather well acquainted. Yeah. The other thing about the Crockett's here, this is Walter Crockett, and he married a black who was from Western Virginia, Blacksburg. Her father founded Blacksburg, Virginia, and that's where the name Black comes from. Is for her.
She was named Black.
Yeah. Anyway. So some of the connections of the families are kind of interesting. We have this one here. We also have the connection of the Crockett's with the Ebys, because in one of their wagon trains, they came out together. That was the one that Winfield and Jacob Eby were a part of, was the one from northern Missouri where they lived. Both families lived up there, Putnam County. And they got together and, of course, went through Independence, Missouri, and out the Oregon Trail. So they came by land. And close tie there. But I did not know until I did the research on where they lived that there's such a good connection between those two families. And that's kind of neat to find out. Okay, so Walter, there's two of them. Walter's the senior one, born in 1786. he's the oldest born person that I know of in the cemetery. And that's right on the marker. It also mentions the Roanoke Farm. I thought maybe Roanoke Farm was some kind of like today a historic farm in the Roanoke River Valley or something, but I couldn't find anything. So they put Roanoke Farm twice on that monument, but it's just one of many farms probably in that area. So it definitely, it all pins down that Western Virginia is kind of their launching point to going to Kentucky and then on to here. We have a son there, Charles. We have another son over there, Walter Jr., and then mother and father over there. Okay, so let's go maritime on this last one. Okay, we've gone all land travel so far. Anybody feeling dusty and tired? Let's go by ship. Okay, we're going to go down to the Lovejoys. As if you don't have enough story already, I forgot a main story for the Crockett's. So there were several sons involved in the war, and Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Crockett, they were all colonels, by the way, and you got to wonder, well, are they honorary colonels, or did they go up through the ranks and kind of really earn it the way you usually think about it? It was both. And I'll go to the one that went up through the ranks. He served in the Continental Army the whole time. And his name was Joseph Crockett, the third. He's the third Joseph. And just to review real quickly, his battles, I can't even pronounce them: Burgoyne, Brandywine, Princeton, Trenton, Valley Forge, over the winter. So he was really there. He knew George Washington, and they became friends. Yeah, how could I forget that? I almost forgot it. Okay, so on his commission as colonel is George Washington's signature on it. It was handed to him by Marquis de Lafayette, I think is the title. Anyway, he's a pretty famous guy from France. And he knew him really well too. And so they served and went all these places. He survived. And then they had a big reunion after the war where it was really big. A lot of people attended, including Lafayette. And there were two Crockett's who were side by side with Lafayette during that reunion the whole time. And he was one of them, and he had a cousin, also a Crockett cousin, that was with him. And you just got to read it. It was amazing. Okay, back to the Lovejoys. Where are we? I jumped around a little bit in there. Let me see. Yeah, here we go. Okay. There's two plots for the Lovejoys. This is the earliest one, and this is the one that has the father in it, our father from around here, and that's Howard Bentley Lovejoy. It's real easy to get the Lovejoys mixed up because their initials are both HB, but the middle name does differ. Okay, so Bentley's up there, and he's with Callista. Anybody heard of Callista? Yeah. Okay. Don't need a lot of introduction there. She's like, uh, you know, uh, who's the Ingle I'm trying to think of? Flora Ingle. Kind of like that, you know, in terms of stories around here and people's familiarity with them. And I could tell all kinds of good stories about her, but we'll have to wait for another time, I think. She deserves recognition. There's two women that I just want to really recognize, Callista and also Susan Hunter Crockett Hancock. The women get shorted in this whole thing. You know, we're focusing on the guys who did the fighting per se, and that's the men, but you can't forget about the women and the back home stuff, because that's what helped keep it going. Yeah. Anyway, he's here with one son. That's his youngest son. That's Captain Lauren Bentley Lovejoy. So he had as a middle name the same as his father. And that's only one son. There's another plot over there that's just full of captains that are Lovejoys. And you just can't say enough about what all they did in this community, and then later in Seattle that was maritime. I mean, we're talking about piloting ships on the deep sea, or captaining them, I should say, and building ships, steamboats, and building enduring, beautiful homes. The famous Lovejoy homes from around here were built by the son over there. And they were known for piloting boats too, bringing them in from the sea and safely getting them to where they need to go. Just an absolutely huge name. And so I didn't know very much about where they came from. You know, I think I kind of remembered a little bit about their having some kind of maybe Canadian connection or something, maybe up there at Maine. And that was the case. The family originated in Massachusetts, and then going back around before the Revolutionary War. They originated in Massachusetts and worked their way up to both New Hampshire and today's Maine. But back when they were in Maine, it was still administered by Massachusetts. It was like a district. Is that right? Okay. 1820 is when Maine became a state. Everybody maybe heard of the Missouri Compromise. Big deal in our political history. Anyway, that's what brought Maine in as a counterpoint to Missouri as far as being slave or non-slave, that kind of thing. So anyway, they helped found really Maine. They were on the frontier. They were, this guy is actually a brother of Hezekiah. Okay, so Hezekiah was the direct descendant for the people around here, the Hancocks, Elizabeth and Allen Hancock, for the war. And then they had one son who fought in the war, and Hezekiah himself fought, so kind of two there. And then a really fascinating thing that is kind of a little bit removed from the family because it's a brother of Hezekiah, but that brother was the one that went up into Maine and right on the frontier founding things and all. And he did a lot of the kind of thing that our family here did, the Lovejoys on Whidbey Island, up in Maine. And I never knew anything about that. His name's Ariel. Ariel. It's a biblical name given by God. And so he was an Indian fighter. He was in the French and Indian War. And he didn't fight per se for the Continental Army, but he helped finance it. And the way that happened was Benedict Arnold was making his way up through the wilds of Maine on his way to try to take Canada and Quebec. and all that. But they were foraging along the way. They didn't have hard cash. They had continental paper money. And Ariel traded a large sum of hard money to Benedict Arnold for his paper and essentially just financed him. You know, he never got it back really, but that helped propel our army headed north. Okay, so so that's what happened around the war for the family, and then I got interested. Well, you know, where did our Howard Bentley Lovejoy come from? And he came from a little town called Milltown on, and I don't know how to pronounce this, Croix River. Croc?
Croy. Croy.
Croy. Croy. I knew it'd be something tricky like that. That's why I asked for help. I knew I needed it. Anyway, it's on the Croy River, and that's real similar to other, you know, pioneers that were on rivers and stuff like that. He wasn't directly on the ocean, but he had easy access to it. And this fellow, yeah, I forgot to tell you. Okay, I'm getting two different people on the rivers. Well, I'll finish with our guy first. Milltown, when he was there, was a frontier town. It didn't have that many people in it. It only had several mills. Later it had 20. But at the time it was just developing. And that's where he presumably got his sea legs, was at that town. But in terms of family heritage, we do know a lot more about Ariel because there's essentially a book written on him. And what he did was a variety of things. You know, they all wore a lot of hats. And this guy, Ariel Lovejoy in Maine, settling it, wore a lot of hats. He did agriculture, he did government service, he did merchandising, he did sawmilling, and he did shipbuilding. And the ships that he built were lumber schooners, and they took lumber to Boston from up in Maine to help build Boston and rebuild it after burning. Yeah. So a lot of heritage, a lot of similarity you can see in that family for doing things. You know, you wonder, where did they get all this? Well, it's in the family. Yeah, it dates back. Okay, well, probably better end it here. We can adjourn to the blockhouse where we have some illustrative kind of things to show you, and also can answer questions and talk a little bit about the method that we use to find out what we made up here. And
Can I point out something really quick while we're down here?
Oh, here we
I
go.
just wanted to point this out since we've been staring at it. This is, Winfield was the first person buried up here on this hill. This is the second one. And this is Julia and William Liesel, and they're a brother and sister. They died within 2 days of each other, and they were probably 5 and 7, I believe. Anyway, Mary Bozarth, who buried her brother up here, she was friends with their mother, good friends with her mother, and they both died within 2 days of each other. And Mary said that she could bury him up here on the hillside with Winfield because she didn't own any property. They had nowhere to bury anyone at that time. So she's like, well, bury him up here. So anyway, these two kids were the second one. It's buried on this hillside, and I just was staring at it. I wanted to point it out.
Thank you. Yeah, is there a lot? You agree? I mean, it's kind of amazing.
Well, every headstone has a story.
It really does.
And you could go on forever
Yeah.
looking into it.
Okay. Well, thank you for your kind attention, and let's all kind of explore this together. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.